I am going to use a traveling mic because in my classroom I like to roam around and talk to my students. And so thank you for having me. Who is excited about the eclipse tomorrow? Woo, right? Yes. And I am thrilled to be here to share my love of space exploration and all things science with you guys. And I want to start by telling you a little bit about my background. I am a geology professor, so I'm not an astronomer, but I have a love of space and space exploration. And that has led me to do some really interesting kind of crazy things like live in a Mars simulation for 4 months and to just seek out ways of spreading science communication to other people. I have been teaching for over 17 years at the community college, and what I've realized is that the knowledge that I was giving my students didn't matter unless they could communicate that knowledge to other people in a meaningful way. And so science communication has been a big emphasis on what I do. And so typically in my classroom, I will not sit up and lecture anymore. Instead, we engage in activities, because what I do with my students is we talk about the knowledge that we collectively have, the knowledge that you have, and how do we know that knowledge is correct? How do we know that what we're thinking is the right model? So if you're willing to work with me, we're going to go through an activity today about the science behind the Great American Eclipse. So you ready to get motivated and work in your groups? Okay, so on your table you have a piece of white paper. Everybody take one piece of white paper and take out a pen or a pencil. I know, right? Work. Yes, and I won't make you turn this in for your solar glasses, so there's no pressure here, all right? So everybody take a piece of paper and a writing utensil.
Does every person need a writing utensil or every table?
Every person. So this is an individual activity at first. Yeah, so I'm hoping that some people have some in their bags that you brought some. But if you're not, you can work in groups. You can work with somebody else if you do not have a writing utensil. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about this question. How does a total solar eclipse occur? I want you to draw an illustration and label the components. So that's your task right now, is to think about a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse. And how does it occur? Can you draw an illustration for that? So what we're thinking about right now is individual knowledge. What do you know individually about this event that's happening tomorrow? Would you be able to communicate what the science is behind how a total eclipse works? And so you're just taking a moment, drawing down your notes, your thoughts on how this celestial event occurs. I see some people really getting into some art credit going on here, which is really good, right? I always say in my class that you should get not only a science credit, but an art credit from my class. Okay, what I want you to do now that you've got that down, I want you in your groups to talk about your drawing with each other. Yes, you're going to interact with each other at your table. So I want you to share your drawing and talk about the components on each of your sheets. So whose drawing do you like and why? You know, who's got the information? Is yours the best drawing? Do you need to combine information? I'm going to walk around and check in on you guys as you're doing this. So you're explaining what's happening to each other. You're sharing your knowledge collectively. Okay, no Googling the answer, of course. Okay, let's come back together. All right. Okay, let's come back together up here, you guys. Everybody. This is with my classroom. I get my classroom all going, and then I'm like, all right, when I raise my hand. And so, now, at your table, how confident that you have collectively come up with a good model of how a total solar eclipse works? Raise your hand if you think your table has a good idea. Raise your hand. And now look around and see. Okay? Now, here's an interesting question. In your groups, how do you know that model is correct? Like, how do you know that what you put down really is how a total solar eclipse happens? Yeah, faith. No, what is it? 2 semesters of astronomy. Okay, yeah, let's talk about this. But this is an interesting question because I'm always dealing with my students. What do you know? How do you know it's correct, right? Oh, let's go around and ask. Okay, so raise your hand.
From evidence, from previous eclipses, from reading about the models that, like the one we just created, and seeing the actual photographs and descriptions from scientists of eclipses that have happened in the past.
Okay, so the evidence from eclipses that happened in the past.
Predictions of future ones.
Predictions of future ones.
Actually, it's more than just the evidence. We know about the laws of gravitation and how they govern the sun, moon, and earth. And from these, we can compute where the orbits go. And there are six orbital elements that are involved in describing the moon's orbit around the earth. And from those, we can compute when eclipses occur.
So again, what we're dealing with is this knowledge base that has come before and using data.
Because Google said so.
Google said so, right? How many of you guys Google on a daily basis? Oh, yes. And so this whole idea of comparing our knowledge to the scientific knowledge that's out there. And so if you were going to compare your drawing or sketch now, what would you compare it against? What source would you go to? My next slide, right? And guess where I got that from? NASA, right? And so this whole idea of the scientific knowledge that we have, how do we know it's correct? We go to reputable sources. We go to reputable sources for information. Take a moment to look at this one and compare it to what you have at your table. And talk about what you have on your drawing and what you might not have that NASA's included on their drawing. So take a moment and talk to each other again. Okay, so now let's come back together and talk about how many of you at your table came up to a drawing that was similar to this, or somewhat similar. Raise your hand. So collectively, our knowledge, even if you were at a table at first where you're drawing, you're like, I'm not sure, but collectively at your table, you were able to come up with a working model that was very similar to what our scientists are putting out right now. Why don't we have a total eclipse every month? In your groups. No, talk in your groups first. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay? So what's going on there? Why don't we have a total eclipse every single month? Okay, so we're talking about, why don't we have a total solar eclipse every month?
Is where the moon moves behind the Earth, so it's now the Earth blocking the sun's light on the moon, creating a shadow on it with a red tint. The easy way to remember the difference is to remember what gets darker. With the solar eclipse, the sun gets darker, and during a lunar eclipse, the moon does. A solar eclipse is a rare event that not many get to see, because the moon's shadow is relatively small. This limits the locations on Earth that get to see it. You have to be on the sunny side of the planet, and you have to be in the path of the moon's shadow. So, if you find your area in the path of totality one year, you've hit the jackpot, because on average, that same spot on Earth will only get to see a solar eclipse every 375 years. During a solar eclipse, the moon casts a shadow with two parts, the umbra and penumbra. The moon's umbra is part of the moon's shadow where the entire sun is blocked by the moon. In space, it's a cone extending some 400,000 kilometers behind the moon. it's when the small end of this cone hits the Earth that we experience a total solar eclipse. Most eclipse maps depicting the path will show you a circle representing the shadow of the moon, but in actuality, the true shape of the umbra is more like an irregular polygon with slightly curved edges. This is because the moon isn't a perfect circle. It has mountains and valleys on its surface, which all affect the passing sunlight and subsequent shape of its shadow. And scientists now have a greater understanding of the shape of the moon's surface, thanks to NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The unprecedented level of detail from the topographic maps, photos, and other datasets has allowed us to more precisely pinpoint the regions on Earth falling within the path of totality of a solar eclipse. So, if you get the chance to witness a solar eclipse, always remember that our little moon plays a role that's quite large.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you, you're talked in your groups. Oh, sorry. And so now you've talked in your groups about why we don't have a total solar eclipse every month. So I'm going to show you an animation. This one doesn't have sound. And I want you to watch this and think about what you're seeing here. And is this what you came up with? So think about the perspective that it's showing you. Okay, let's watch that one more time. And what is happening here? What do you notice about the moon and the ecliptic plane of the Earth? With this one. There's two planes, right? And so when the moon is going around the Earth, its chances of actually hitting the shadow of the moon, hitting the Earth, is limited, because they're not on the same plane all the time, right? It's a 5-degree difference from the ecliptic that the moon is at. And as a result, things like a total solar eclipse only happen somewhere on the Earth every year and a half. And for it to be in your location is even rarer. And so that's why, again, why tomorrow is so special. And so this video, before it actually starts,
What we're talking.
the reason why I wanted to put this video in is because they were talking about the fact that I was in a Mars simulation. I've actually done 2 Mars simulations. I spent 2 weeks at the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah, and then I did 4 months in a Mars simulation called High Seas on the Big Island of Hawaii. And so as a result of that, you would think that I would be the first person to sign up for a trip to Mars. Well, when I got out of the high seas habitat, we had all these interviews with reporters. And one of them asked me, they were like, hey, so you're ready to go to Mars? And it was funny because I stopped and I thought, no, I don't want to go to Mars. I realized that I'm not a Mars girl, I'm a moon girl. Like, I want to be the first female on the moon. You know, men have stepped on the moon. How about a woman, right? A female geologist. And so that was one of the things that doing the simulation, I realized that about myself, that I grew up in the shuttle era. I loved the shuttle, the space shuttle, and I just dreamed about going to the moon. And one of the things in my history is I was actually born on the island of Guam. Has anybody been there? Guam? Oh, there we go. And the reason a lot of people say that, are you military? And I say no. My father was working for NASA during that time, from 1966 to 70 for the Apollo missions. And I actually grew up with Neil Armstrong's autograph to my father on his wall in our house office. And as a result of that, I've always had this fascination with the moon. So how many of you guys would go to Mars if they would bring you back? Raise your hand if you'd go. Now, how many of you go to the moon? If they bring you back. So what I love So this next video, the reason why I wanted to put it in here is because the amount of data that has been collected by scientists to create really interesting visualizations for this eclipse has been unprecedented. And this illustration shows you some of the things that they've done.
About is several visualizations of the path of the moon's shadow during the eclipse in 2017. Everything in it is driven by the data. So the color of the ground, the position of the path of totality, the lighting from the sun angle, all of those are things that are based on data. A lot of NASA products were used to create this visualization. I used the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the laser altimetry data from that, which gives us a digital map of the elevations on the moon. For the Earth, I used something called SRTM. This was a radar that was flown on the space shuttle. For the positions of the Earth, the moon, and the sun, I used a JPL ephemeris. And ephemeris is just a list of positions, but it's the most accurate tabulation of those positions. This visualization is unique because it shows the effect of both the irregular edge of the moon, the limb of the moon we call it, and the elevation of the observer. Now, we've known for a long time that the elevation of the observer affects where the shadow is. And we've also known that the mountains and the valleys along the edge of the moon affect the shadow. So you may have seen on eclipse maps in the past that the image of the umbra, that shape of the shadow on the Earth, is drawn as a smooth oval. But we know that the moon isn't smooth. Around the edge of the moon, we have these sort of jagged peaks and valleys. And a peak can block the sun a little bit earlier than you thought, and a valley can let the sun in a few seconds longer than you thought. The combined effect of these peaks and valleys is to create a shape that's not really an oval, it's more like a polygon. But it hasn't actually been seen in exactly this way before, where we calculate those circumstances for every point on the map and draw that shape. Totality is that 2 minutes when or 2.5 minutes when the moon completely covers the sun. The sudden darkness of totality is just something that a lot of people can't compare to anything else. I love the idea that I'm giving this kind of map to other people, and especially that it's more detailed and more accurate so that people are actually in the right place to see it.
Science and data coming together to make this experience that we're going to have tomorrow absolutely amazing. And so, who here has seen a total solar eclipse? Raise your hand. I have not. So we'll look around and we can see we've got about 10 people in the room who has seen a total solar eclipse. And so what I wanted you to do in your groups really quickly, because we're running out of time, is I want you to talk about what are your expectations for tomorrow. And if you're sitting with somebody who has seen a solar total eclipse, what was that first time like for you? So take a moment and talk to each other about what are your expectations for tomorrow? Okay. All right, so I'm running a little long here, and I don't want to, we've got some other events, but one of the things that we're all basically going after is totality. That's one of the big things that we want to see, is because how many of you have seen a partial eclipse? Okay, right? And so the totality is going to be amazing. And some of the things that we should think about is Baily's beads effects. And that is right before totality, when the sun is completely covered. Because of the irregularity of the lunar surface, you get these pearly light beads that are coming through the edge of the moon. And you'll be able to look for that tomorrow. So that's one of the things that I want you to look for. But the big thing is the corona and the chromosphere, and being able to see that during the totality. And you've seen that.
Amazing.
Okay, wait. Say it one more time.
It is amazing.
And when we're thinking about what is happening here, one of the things that I want to do is I want to let you know that science is still ongoing. It's always happening. We're getting better at looking at phenomenon, events like this, using not only the research scientists, but you as a community. And so tomorrow, one of the things
Studying
that I
total
want you
solar
to,
eclipses have revealed
I'm not used to, it's starting. One of the things that I want you to think about is this last video of what you can look for during the time of totality, okay? And so this is really cool. And I'll ruin the surprise early.
Studying total solar eclipses have revealed some of the most fundamental discoveries in science today. During these celestial events, scientists discovered the sun structure, the first proof of Einstein's theory of general relativity, and the element helium, 30 years before it was found on Earth. They also discovered huge solar explosions called coronal mass ejections, eruptions on the sun that continue to be an important component of NASA's research. Coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, are giant eruptions made up of hot gas and plasma. From the sun's surface, they propel immense clouds of solar material into space, speeding at up to 1 million miles per hour and carrying enough energy to power the world for 10,000 years. Sometimes they're directed towards Earth when they can affect our planet's space environment, causing space weather. Scientists track and study CMEs because they can trigger global changes in Earth's magnetic field. When intense, these can create magnetic storms that can cause aurora, but can also affect satellite electronics and power grids on the ground. Scientists discovered these eruptions in the 1970s during the beginning of the modern satellite era, a time when satellites in space were able to capture thousands of images of solar activity that had never been seen before. But in hindsight, these might not have been the first time scientists had noticed these solar features. Soon after they discovered CMEs, scientists came across reports of a total solar eclipse in 1860 that looked very similar to their satellite images. On July 18, 1860, the shadow of the moon travelled over North America, Spain, and North Africa before departing Earth. Much of the path of totality travelled over populated land, resulting in a wealth of observations. Back then, astronomical photography was still new, so many scientists recorded their observations by hand. The drawings show the large white fingers of the corona, and also a distinctive arc-like feature. With multiple images drawn from different locations across Europe, it appears to evolve over time, but not all the images showed this. About 2/3 of people saw the tulip head-like shape, but 1/3 didn't see anything at all, including renowned scientist Angelo Secchi. It wasn't until over 100 years later, with regular satellite imagery, that scientists reopened the debate about what was seen in the 1860 eclipse. The strong resemblance shows that this eclipse may be the first record of a CME. While satellites in the space age exploded the field of CME research, total solar eclipses seen from the ground still provide unique views of the sun's atmosphere that help our understanding of what causes these explosions. Current instruments in space studying the corona need to block the sun's bright body with an occulting disk. The disk covers up the sun and a portion of the lower corona, an important region that scientists believe is responsible for accelerating CMEs and forming solar wind. So when eclipses happen to fall on land, scientists take advantage of these rare events. With each new total eclipse, there's the chance for new information and new research, and the chance to reveal something as astronomical as the first CME.
So that's something that tomorrow you can think about during the zone of totality that you might not have thought of was a CME, and looking for that. And so one of the things that we would need to talk about is safety, and how you view the sun. And I know that there's been a lot about wearing protective glasses. And it's really important that tomorrow that you don't look at the sun directly. And my question to you is, are your sunglasses okay to use? No, they are not. And luckily, you will be able to get a pair of glasses tomorrow because they're being provided for everybody at the conference. So round of applause to David for making that happen. And so the one thing that I want you to make sure that you understand, though, is that you have your glasses while there's a partial eclipse happening, which is the beginning and right before totality and after. But during totality, in order to see the corona, you need to take your glasses off. And that's when you'll see it. That's for that, yeah, for 2.5 minutes, basically. You're going to want to take it off then and see that.
It'll be less than that here. It's not a time. I just want to make sure.
Yes, it's going to be less than 3 minutes. It's going to be about 2, yeah, it's like 2, yeah. No, no, no. Oh, that would be nice. And so for additional information, I want you to know that NASA is streaming live, and that they're going to be doing that. The NASA website is amazing for additional information, but there's also apps that you can download. And so there's the NASA app. If you haven't downloaded that already, that's got some really great information. And a lot of times people don't realize, but this symbol here on NASA that was added, that's an augmented reality symbol. And what you can do is there's an app, and I had my NASA shirt on yesterday, and I brought out the app, and I'm like, had somebody, use the augmented reality and launch a rocket off of my shirt. And so it's a fun app to play with, and later, if you find me, I've got a sticker with it, and I can show you what I mean with being able to launch spacecraft off of that. And then the Smithsonian has an app. All of these apps right here are on the NASA website, and there's ways for you to get involved as a citizen to collect data and send that data in during the eclipse tomorrow. So I leave you with 2 things. One is that I will be emceeing, narrating the eclipse tomorrow here, and I've brought a telescope with me so we can get a closer look at the sun. I have a telescope with a solar filter on it, yes. And also, I've got handouts. So if you want some information tonight, I've got these handouts and this one with information. So you can see me afterwards, and I will give that to you. And then I look forward to our event tomorrow, Clear Skies. Thank you.